what is the difference between gluten sensitive and celiacs? Because I'm gluten sensitive and I'm not supposed to have gluten. But
Mhm.
I guess my question is, like, I have a friend that's got celiac and she gets really, really sick when she has anything that's gluten. So what's the difference and how bad is it for me to have gluten? I don't have it, but I was just curious.
What is the difference between gluten sensitivity and celiac disease? That's a great question, Jessica. And I would point you to my book if you have it. And chapter 6 is the answer to this. So if you
Okay.
haven't seen my book, it's called The Autoimmune Answer on Amazon. And you can get it softcover, hardcover, Kindle, Audible, however you like to digest books. And chapter 6 is all about this. And so I'll defer to that. It actually happens to be the longest chapter in the book too, because there's lots of info about this, but I'll give you the answer too in video form here. And so the difference is in scale. I like to kind of describe it. If we look at um, if you talk about blood sugar issues, for example, blood sugar issues occur on a spectrum, right? From, you know, maybe the extreme end would be diabetes, and here would be, good. And as it gets too high, as we go up this way, maybe we start to have some insulin resistance, and that doesn't get handled. So now we're moving to prediabetes. And then as that progresses, now we're full-blown diabetes, which is the most extreme form. So there's a range or a spectrum of blood sugar dysfunction. So from a gluten reactivity standpoint, and I have multiple videos on this as well on the YouTube channel, but there's a couple things that you want to understand. The celiac version is the most extreme. So celiac disease is an autoimmune disease against targeting what's called in the GI tract called tissue transglutaminase. And so if someone has celiac disease, they have autoimmune attack against this enzyme, which is produced by the villi in their small intestine. And so the way that it's diagnosed classically is they do an endoscopy, and they go down and they look in the small intestine and they're looking for what's called villus atrophy. And if you stick your hand up in front of your face with like wide open, so it's a like you're gonna high five somebody, your fingers are out straight in front of you. Your fingers would be the villi in a healthy small intestine. And so if you're gonna trace your hand and you trace over the fingers all the way down, to your knuckles and back up to the fingertip, those are the villi, and that space between the villi is a lot of surface area where your intestine can release digestive enzymes, and it's called the intestinal brush border. And so the longer your fingers are and the more space, from fingertip to knuckle and in between, that's nice, healthy villi, nice digestive capacity, absorption capacity, that's healthy. Now, if you take your hand and you close it and make a fist, now those villi are all blunted, right? It's like you cut off your fingers. And so that's called villus atrophy. And essentially, you've lost all that surface area. So where when you were tracing your hand, you had tons of surface area between each finger and going up and down over them. If you make a fist, you can trace your fist real quick because it's just that, half circle lump. And so when the villi are atrophied or damaged, your ability to produce digestive enzymes to digest your food, absorb your food, all of that is drastically reduced. And that atrophy is caused by gluten cross-reactivity with that tissue transglutaminase enzyme and leads to immune attack on the villi and damages them. So you can see that again on the endoscopy as villus atrophy, but there are some people that have celiac disease. It's not diagnosable yet as villus atrophy on the endoscopy. Okay, so You can have basically latent celiac disease. It hasn't become full blown yet, and it's not seen on endoscopy yet. And so the way you have to see it is through antibody testing against tissue transglutaminase. And so when they test, if you think you have celiac disease, if you can get your MD to test it, they'll run tissue transglutaminase IgG and IgA. And they should also run your total IgG and IgA. And they should also run endomesial IgA, which is another intestinal target. And so what is IgG and IgA? IG stands for immunoglobulin, which is fancy for antibody. We have 5 different types of immunoglobulins in the immune system. You could remember them as the mnemonic GAMED. They're IgG, A, M, E, and D. We don't know a whole lot about D scientifically. We do know a lot about the rest. And specific to this conversation, G and A, G is the memory cells to the immune system, and IgA are the antibodies that are the first line of defense at mucosal barriers. So gut, lung, sinus, bladder, skin, gums, etc. So if you've got antibodies to tissue transglutaminase at the mucosal barrier, as evidenced by IgA, and you've got the memory cells in IgG, you've got autoimmune attack against tissue transglutaminase, you've got latent celiac disease. You've got immune recognition of that target. And so just because it's not diagnosable yet on endoscopy, I also talk about this in the book. I show you what's it called? The spectrum from health to autoimmune disease. And just because you don't fit full-blown diagnostic criteria for autoimmunity doesn't mean you're healthy, right? If you have positive antibodies, but a negative endoscopy, that could put you right here, which is not healthy. It's just not diagnosable yet. Okay, it's latent. It hasn't become full blown yet. And so rather than allow you to become full blown until they diagnose you, functional medicine says, well, let's find where you are on the process. If you have positive antibodies, then you're in process regardless of whether you meet diagnostic criteria or not. So let's try and stop that process now so you don't meet full-blown criteria. So celiac disease patients, it's caused by wheat consumption, and the only treatment for it is to completely eliminate wheat/gluten. Okay? So if a celiac patient consumes wheat, which gluten is a fraction of wheat, they may have diarrhea, they may have bloody diarrhea, they may have vomiting, they may have bloody vomiting, like they don't do well. It's obvious. Okay? And that is autoimmune driven. Now, you could have a different form of gluten reactivity, which you were asking about before, which is gluten sensitivity.
I think that's what I have, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in my book, in the science, they call it non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Okay, to help you differentiate from celiac and non-celiac. But anyway, in lay terms, we would just say, hey, it's gluten sensitivity. And um, this is sensitivities are one thing. Sorry, and let me differentiate it one other way for you, because we also have what's called gluten allergy as an option. Okay. So allergies are determined by IgE antibodies. If you went to an allergist, they might do a skin prick test on you, and prick your skin and see, do you get the little histamine wheel when you're exposed to an allergen like gluten? But the better way to test would be to draw your blood and see, do you have IgE to gluten or to wheat? If you do have IgE antibodies to wheat or to gluten, then it can be said that you have an allergy to that. Okay. And so allergies, might drive hives or rash or, swelling, or all the way up to an EpiPen moment, right? Allergies, the allergists care about those because there's a possibility for anaphylaxis, which could kill somebody. So allergy, they pay attention to. Sensitivity, they kind of roll their eyes at. Why? Well, sensitivity is diagnosed by IgG or IgA positivity, again, to wheat or gluten or gliadin or any number of the protein fractions of wheat. Okay. And so, why might the allergist roll their eyes when you say, I think I have gluten sensitivity? Well, for a couple reasons. The first being that gluten sensitivity isn't killing anyone today. Okay. Because it's a sensitivity, which is sensitivity is literally IgG or IgA. That's what's called delayed hypersensitivity reaction. And it means what it says. It's delayed. So you could eat gluten today and you might not have a symptom today. It might not manifest for 7 to 10 days. And then by the time you have the symptom, you forgot what you ate, yesterday, let alone 10 days ago.
Right.
So you might not connect it to gluten. In the same way, if you think you have the gluten sensitivity, that kind of paralyzes the allergist because if they do a skin prick test, you might not react right away in their office. It might take 10 days, and by then you're long gone from their office. So they don't really care about it because although it may be ruining your quality of life right now, you're not at risk of death. Whereas with gluten allergy, if you have anaphylaxis to it, you could die today, right? It's called acute hypersensitivity reaction. And so again, this could acutely lead to end of life scenario. And so they do care about that and want to prevent that. So this would be, and then I guess the last thing which can fall on the spectrum here, let's go this color here. We could say there's gluten, oops, gluten intolerance. And this is non-immune mediated. So far, all the other four we've talked about is a immune mediated gluten reaction. So the immune system is playing a role. Gluten intolerance would be something that is not immune mediated. So this would be something like you don't have the proper enzymes to break it down and digest it, say. Kind of like lactose intolerance, right? You can't digest the lactose because you don't have lactase, the enzyme that digests it anymore. So gluten intolerance is a non-immune mediated reaction to gluten for some reason. And so all of these, to continue eating gluten in the context of any of these is not a good idea. It's just that celiac is the most obvious one that impacts them immediately, followed closely by someone with gluten allergy, like a full-blown anaphylactic type response. But the latent celiac disease, the gluten sensitivity, the gluten intolerance isn't going to kill you. And yeah, it might make your stomach hurt and things, but you're like, well, I like beer. I'll deal with it, right? That sort of thing. Um, so hopefully that piques your interest and answers your question a little bit. If you want more info, check out chapter 6 in the Autoimmune Answer, and it goes even deeper for you.
Okay. All right, thank you. I've been able to
Hmm.
keep the gluten out for this whole time. Like I've at first I had an occasional piece of cake if there was like a
Hmm.
birthday party or something, but I don't even do that anymore. So it's
Yeah,
been a really long time since I've had gluten. So
good.
I've been able to keep it out. So would my situation, like if I ate gluten, would that eventually turn into celiac disease or not necessarily?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So they're all kind of separate.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Um,
I'll read chapter 6 again. I do
yeah,
have your
yeah,
book.
yeah. I mean, they are separate, but you can, um, depending on the case and the situation, like a gluten sensitivity, there is genetic susceptibility to celiac disease. So if you have increased genetic susceptibility and you keep eating gluten, what might have initially been a gluten sensitivity with a non-activated celiac gene, if you keep poking that bear, you might epigenetically turn that gene on, and now you develop celiac because of it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. This is thank you. This has cleared it up.
Yeah,
I'll,
and one more thing to help with that would be, um, gluten sensitivity here. So you could test, right? And it's antibody based. So you test and you say, hey, I have high IgA antibodies, say in your stool to gliadin, which is a protein fraction of gluten. Well, if you cut out the gluten, those antibodies should drop because you're starving them from their antigen. Okay. Or if you picture them as crack addicts, if you don't give them crack, they're going to fall away, right? Because you're starving them of their drug. So if you successfully avoid it, those antibody levels should drop. Now, does that mean you can eat it again when they drop? No, it means you've done a great job avoiding avoiding giving the crackheads crack, right? So
Right.
you shouldn't go back to give them the crack, otherwise they expand and their friends come out of the woodwork and say the crack's back, right?
Yeah.
So you want to avoid it and not poke that bear. And if your levels are lowering, then good job, keep avoiding it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
I have a question about the villi. Are you ever able to get that restored, or is that once it's done, it's done?
It depends on how done it is, right? The body is always wanting to be healthy and restore and regrow itself, and we're always regrowing tissue. So you can do it, and obviously the more conscientious about it you are, the higher the likelihood and probability and speed at which it regrows. And does it regrow fully? Your chances are better the more conscientious you are.